Hello and welcome to GrossiMath.com, where math is for everyone. Today we're going to bring together the lessons that we've learned about simplifying so far so that we can do some problems from beginning to end. So let's get started. Okay, so this could be a problem that you would see out there in the math world. Okay, it might have directions like this that say simplify. And what we've learned so far is this little checklist right here. Everything on this checklist you now know how to do. You know how to identify terms, you know how to multiply, you know how to use standard form, you know how to add and subtract, and you know how to do your final copy. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and just bring all of that together into one series of steps to solve problems. So let's go ahead and get started. Step one is telling me to identify my terms. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. That should always be your first step when you're working with algebra, guys. Now for step two, multiply if appropriate using SNL. Okay, well, do I see a term that needs multiplication? Yes, I do, right here. See these parentheses right here? So I'm going to identify the terms inside the parentheses, just like we practiced. Then I'm going to put my SNLs on the bottom, my snails. And right here, remember at the top, we put our -3 and our -3. And that takes care of our -3 outside. Okay, now remember, if I'm going too fast for you, you need to go back and watch the video about how to do SNL. Okay, all right, so now we're going to do our SNL steps. Negative times positive, well, those are different. So different signs result in a negative sign. Remember, different signs, when they multiply, make negatives. The same sign, when you multiply, results in a positive. Okay, now we're going to do number. 3 times blank. Well, the blank has no effect, so we just hold the 3. The letter, blank times x. Well, again, the blank has no effect, so we just keep the x. Okay, and those are the 3 components of multiplying a term. And we are done with that term. Now we're going to go ahead and do the next snail. Remember not to write anything, just start doing your next snail. Negative times positive. Well, these are different again. Negative and positive are different, so I should put a negative here. Remember, if they're the same, then you would put a positive. Okay, 3 times 1, 3. And there are no letters here. There are no letters here. So therefore, we're going to leave it blank. Okay, so that takes care of this and this. The -5 is still here. So guess what? The -5 would just drop down. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and rewrite this thing so that we can see it a little more clearly. -3x minus 3 minus 5. Okay, now we have done step 1. We have done step 2. Now it says put it into standard form. Well, for standard form, once again, I need my terms. Always identify terms, guys. Don't let expressions sit there and just stare at them. That's not going to help. You have to identify your terms. Standard form means we put our constants at the back and our variables at the front. Okay, so we have here our variable at the front and we have some constants at the back. So actually this one is already in standard form. That happens sometimes. It's fine. We don't have to do any work for this step, that means. If you don't know what I mean by standard form, go back and watch the video for standard form and you will go deep into it. Okay, adding and subtracting. Now remember, when we combine terms or add or subtract terms, what we do is we break them up into groups. So here I have a little x grouping, and here I have a little grouping for my constants. Just a reminder, a constant is a term that has no variable inside. Okay, so for this group is my x group. The only number that I see is -3. So I keep my -3. And that's that. That takes care of the first term. It's already been done. Now I do my constant term. I don't need a letter for my constant term because constants don't have a letter, so therefore they don't get a letter when we add or subtract them. -3 minus 5. Okay. -3 minus 5 is -8. Now again, as I always say, some people will say, well, I'm not good at positives and negatives. Well, that's okay. You could easily put that in a calculator, no? And you would get out -8. So that means that these terms have now been taken care of. Okay, now I have -3x minus 8. Now I need to check for final copy, which basically means look for any zeros or ones or any little special rules like that that I would need to take care of. Well, I don't see any terms with a 0 in it. I don't see any coefficients of 1. So I think this copy is actually a good copy. So I will make this be my final copy as well, negative 3x minus 8. And there you go. I'm done with this one. All right, so let's go try a couple of more of these. Feel free to try to pause the video if you wish, and you can check to see if you can do the problem yourself. Now this one I made a little bit longer on purpose. The same steps apply. Identify your terms. Now if you're wondering what's he doing identifying terms, what does that mean? There's a video. Go watch it, please. Okay. Now, what about when we multiply? We need to look for parentheses in our terms. So here's a term with parentheses, and here's a term with parentheses. These two outside terms don't have any, so this one's actually going to be okay till the next step, and this one will be okay till the next step. So let's go ahead and do our multiplications on these. Step 1, identify the terms inside the parentheses. Step 2, write SNL underneath those boxes. Step 3, whatever is outside the parentheses, put that on top of each box. And that takes care of that. Step 4, follow your snails. Okay, so let's follow our snails. Negative and positive makes negative. 3 and blank makes 3. Blank and A makes A. Negative and positive makes negative. 3 times 4 makes 12. Blank and blank, we leave it blank. Now I go to my next SNL. Negative and positive makes negative. 2 times 3 makes 6. A times blank makes A. Negative times negative. Okay, here we see one that's the same finally. Negative times negative makes positive. Very good. If they're the same, make it positive. Number, 2 times blank makes 2. Letter, A times A, I need to add up my A's, so I make an A squared there. So now this term, this term, this term, and this term have all been taken care of. Now, don't forget, this is if anything is difficult, this is the part that's difficult to me. Don't forget to bring down that 5 and that plus A squared. Okay, so I'm going to recopy this because I like to do things with a little bit easier to see by being neat. Now we've done our multiply step, so we're going to focus on this standard form step. Again, don't just let terms sit. Identify them. Now what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to go looking for the term with the highest variable exponents. So let's take a look. Well, this is a constant, and I know constants are going to go to the back, so I'll save that for later. Okay, here's an A and a blank exponent, which basically counts as an exponent of 1. Okay, so we're going to leave that one alone for now. Another constant, another 1. Let's see. Here we go. A squared and A squared. Okay, so these two have the highest exponents. So therefore, these terms should be at the front. So I'm going to go ahead and put 2A squared at the front. Remember that this plus sign becomes an implied positive sign when it moves to the front. Okay, so we get rid of this term. This term is done now. Plus A squared. Now somebody's going to say, well, what if I did this one first and the 2 second? Technically, it would be better to put the 2 in the front, but honestly, in the end, it's not going to matter because later we're going to add and subtract and it's all going to come out in the wash anyway. So don't worry about that. Okay, so in other words, if you had A squared plus 2A squared, that would also be valid. Okay, so now we're going to have here our 1 exponents. So these two terms right here, negative 3A and negative 6A. Negative 3A, negative 6A. Okay. And now we're going to do our constants. So 5 and 12. Now, do not just write, this is so important, do not just write 5 minus 12. See this space right here? That should have a positive for this 5. Remember, there's a positive sign hidden there. It's just because it's in the front box that we don't show it. So we're going to put our plus 5 now because it's no longer in the front. So now, we'll just go ahead and identify our terms one more time. Standard form is done. We have the exponents in decreasing order and the constants at the back. Now we're going to add and subtract by group, just like we did at the front. So let's identify our groups. We have an A squared group, an A group, and a constant group. So this is A squared, this is A, and this is my constants. Remember that anytime you see a variable with no coefficient, meaning no number in front of it, it counts as a 1. You can put a 1 there. It's an implied 1. So for example, my A squared group would be 2 plus 1, which is 3. My A group would be -3 minus 6, which is -9. And my constant group would be +5 minus 12. 5 minus 12 is -7. My adding and subtracting is done. Now for final copy, we look and we make sure that we don't have any terms with a 0 and we don't have any coefficients of 1. Well, I don't see any terms with a 0. I don't see any of the coefficients being a 1. So I think we're in a good shape. So I'm going to count this as my final copy. And that means we are done with this problem. All right, guys. So those are the steps all joined together so that you can do some basic simplifying of expressions. For testing purposes, you should be okay with this. Okay, at least good enough to get you through any severe situations. I hope you've learned something from this. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell icon, and to visit the website where math is for everyone, www.grossimath.com.